So we're talking reading skills. Now, I know that many of you are more concerned about your literature texts than about paper one. But I want you to remember how many marks come from paper one. And what are you going to need for the rest of your life? You're going to need really good reading skills. And what happens in literature is that you tend to study somebody else's ideas. So we're doing Hamlet at the moment, and I said to one of my students, nice answer, where did you get that from? And she said, well, it's in this little block. No, I want you to engage with the text. But you are more inclined to engage with the text if I give you a non-literary text. It's still reading skills, intensive reading skills. So not the, as I said to you, lean back, put your hands in your pockets and read for fun. It's the kind of skills you're going to need, especially if you're planning to go to university or to a technikon. So let me just remind you about suggestions for the first reading of a text. We've talked about them before. Terribly important. You need words, lots of words. Always look at where they appear. It's a very important reading skill, how to guess a word. This is inside your mind, what you know already. That's also inside your mind. We were doing a text, oh, that's too dark. We were doing a text with my grade 11s that talked about neural. Neural are the connections in your brain, the nerve connections in your brain. So you're making those neural connections. You're linking back to your text. Always predict. What do we think is coming? Always look at when something was published, very important. Look at where something was published. So we've talked before about the conversation Africa. Whether or not you trust the source, is it a reliable source that you're reading, or is it one that you wouldn't trust? Always a way into an article. And here we go. Right, so what do? You react on a number of different levels to this text. So you say, why would the author have chosen to focus on a woman? What is a boycott? What is a consumer boycott? How relevant could we get with what's going on at the moment? Why one? What do we mean by the first consumer boycott? First consumer boycott where? When? The British abolish slavery. Oh my gosh, this is like not now, this is like back. What my students like to say, back then. Back then. When is back then? But this is back then. So do you see you do not just just read the headline. You're looking at key things and your brain is already starting to work. Gosh, I'm thinking all sorts of thoughts. Then I look for when was this published. Okay, so this is fairly recent. All right. So somebody's interested in this fairly recently. Hang on, I've gone backwards, which I didn't intend to do. Where was I? No. I think I've got to boycott. Yes, here I am. So we looked up boycott. Oh, don't jump backwards. Thank you, pumpkin. Right. Look at how the word can change. For those of you who've been looking at the poem that I was looking at last week, one meaning of inflections is the way that the word changes depending on how we use it. So inflection has sort of two main meanings. That's one meaning. So this is for the poem to learn how to speak. Let's look at the verb. If a country, group, or person boycotts, they refuse to be involved with it in any way because they disapprove of it. All right, so what's going on at the moment in our country is that a number of people disapprove of a particular organization, a firm, a company, a corporate, and they are refusing to go there to spend their money. If you continue to do that over a period of time and enough people do it, you are boycotting that group. So just look at it again. If you boycott, you say, I don't want anything to do with you because you've done something that I disapprove of, that I think was wrong. Okay? And then boycott is also a noun. And I've told you why I like the Collins online dictionary, is it gives me an example there, and an example there, an example there. Just read them quickly. All right, so are boycotting is the finite verb. A boycott is a noun. A boycott. All right? Would you say that at the moment there's a successful national boycott against the company's products? The one that I'm referring to? Yes? No? Not hearing any sounds from those people next door. Right, pull off. To pull off. Remove your clothing. So you can imagine if I said I'm about to pull off my t-shirt. No, thank you, don't do that. Right. Succeed in performing a difficult feat. Now, if you didn't know feat, this is what I love about online. You just click on that. A feat is something that you do. It's an action. So a difficult feat, to succeed in doing something that is difficult, is to pull off. You can pull off if you're a car. Please, the cops stop you and they say, please pull off, and you're in the road and you come to the side of the road. Okay? But it can also mean you pull off because you stopped and you're now going into the traffic. You pull off. So you've heard somebody saying, that idiot, he's just pulled off in front of me. Okay? So pull off has a number of different meanings. Please, this is terribly important for reading skills, is that words don't have just one meaning. So which meaning do we need? I want to look at this one. If you pull off something very difficult, you succeed in achieving it. So all I did on the website is I just went down the website and found more meanings, but you can see very similar. I love it that they give me examples. And then I also gave you pulling off the road, okay? And there were examples. Always look at the author. Who's responsible for this? What do we know about Chapman University? Oh, it's in California. Where's California? I keep on doing this. This is not helping me. Let me go down. Okay, there he is. There's California. We had, in that article I was telling you about with the grade 11s, we had Massachusetts and it wasn't Wisconsin. So you are meant to know the names of the states in the United States of America. Okay, you just are. Sorry about that. Right? This is something about him. Right, so he writes, according to this, non-fiction. And do we know any of these? Right, these are magazines. And he's a professor of English. Okay, so that tells us something about him. Okay, so we're happy with that. And then I thought, just in case you wanted to know where it was, and because I've got the chance to show you maps, and Mbali said to me, maps? Why are we doing maps? Because you need to have as much, and I'm sorry I say this, my matrix is saying I'm saying it far too much. You've got to have a lot of stuff in your head if you're going to understand things that you read. So here, look at the map. Got nice names. I love the name Albuquerque, don't you? Just sounds so wonderful. All right, but there's Chapman University, California. I'm sure you've heard of that one. Yes. Yes, all right, okay. All right, so maps. We know where he comes from. If I can just move this, wonderful. All right. I gave you an example. Some people are advocating a consumer boycott of Starbucks over an internal memo that prohibits employees from wearing gear that refers to the movement. And advocates are urging supporters to target other companies under the Twitter tag of boycott for Black lives. Right, so we're kind of okay with boycott. Right. What do we understand by blood sugar? Would you please write down everything you think of? Activate your neural pathways. Your neural pathways are the pathways in the brain. Write down anything. Let's give you, 10 seconds. Write down anything you can think of related to blood sugar. Consumer boycotts, which have put power in the hands of people of even modest income and can lend a sense of doing something in the face of injustice, have a mixed track record. There have been some notable successes, such as consumer-led efforts to end apartheid in South Africa, but others, such as boycotts of the National Rifle Association and of Israel, have yielded little. So, do we understand a consumer boycott? Look at this. What do we mean by modest income? This means that you are not wealthy, but you've got some money. So consumer boycotts are not the wealthy, it's just the ordinary person, and they can lend to a sense of doing something. There have been successes, but the successes are mixed. There's a successful one, there's less successful. Right, more about Black Lives Matter and consumer boycotts. It may hearten Black Lives Matter consumer activists to learn that the first ever boycott, organized over 50 years before the term was even coined, was ultimately a success, if not in the way the woman behind it intended. I stumbled upon this history during research for my just published book about the end of slavery in the British Caribbean. So let's just look at where we've got to. All right. Okay, let's leave that for a moment. So consumer boycotts, which put power into the hands of people of even modest income and can lend a sense of doing something in the face of injustice, have a mixed track record. There have been some notable successes, such as consumer-led efforts to end apartheid in South Africa, but others, such as boycotts of the National Rifle Association and of Israel, have yielded little. It may hearten Black Lives Matter consumer activists to learn that the first ever boycott, organized over 50 years before the term was even coined, was ultimately a success, if not in the way the woman behind it intended. I stumbled upon this history during research. Who is the I? Remember, we're talking about this author. Where are we? This one. So he's writing this article and he's dealing with Black Lives Matter And he says he stumbled upon this information. Okay? Let's just go back to this. If we're looking at just a phrase, all I'm saying to you is when you see something, activate your neural pathways. Think of everything you can, and it could come in to what you are reading, all right? So if I can get back to this, I will, but I see I'm starting to run out of time. So it's just a matter of whatever you are looking at can bring in stuff that you've done elsewhere. Look at this paragraph. We have a reference to us, to this, to Israel. Now, everybody will understand that reference. Do we understand these? That's what I'm saying to you about activate your thinking, activate your neural pathways. Right, so he says he's just published a book about the end of slavery in the British Caribbean. So you know what's coming. You can see it coming right here. Maps. So let's have a look. Can you see Caribbean Sea there? And you're looking at all of these little islands down here. In the 1820s, Elizabeth Hayrick felt disgust over Britain's enslavement of people on islands such as Barbados and Jamaica. Pause. Can you find Barbados and Jamaica? Yes? Are we okay? Right. Such as Barbados and Jamaica in the West Indies, where large sugar plantations produce virtually all the sugar consumed in Western Europe. Do you understand? Sugar, blood sugar. We've been doing coronavirus. Are you making connections? Yes? Okay. So go back in the 1820s, right? So 1920s, 2020s. Look at when we're talking about. This woman felt disgust over Britain's enslavement of people on these islands where large sugar plantations produced virtually all the sugar consumed in Western Europe. Yes? Okay, more back to my maps. I wanted you to get a bigger picture. So I said to you this is the Caribbean, right? What do we know here? Do you recognize this? Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, right? Miami, surely you know Miami. So this is the Gulf of Mexico. There's Cuba, all right? Just trying to put it in some kind of perspective for you. And that should show you where we are. There's your Caribbean Sea. There's your Central American states. There's the United States, there's the top of South America. So we're talking about the fact that sugar was coming from this area and being exported to Europe. Let me go back to that. And who was producing the sugar? Slaves. On islands of Barbados and Jamaica in the West Indies. They were sending it to Western Europe and they were using slave labor. Right. Although England banned the British Atlantic slave trade in 1807, it still permitted people to own slave in its colonies in the early 19th century. So look at that. Slavery is apparently gone. The slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, which is so important for our thinking about what happened in Africa. And ties in with what we are saying now about Black Lives Matter. All of these things, do you understand how they all interconnect? But look at this. Although they banned slave trade, oh, but if you had slaves, you didn't have to give them up. Right. So there is a map that I've got for you of the Atlantic slave trade. Right, so what are you seeing? Here are the West Indies. Do you see mentioned in our article? And do you see sugar going across here to Britain and off to Europe? And do you see down here, it's a bit cut off, do you see here who was coming from Africa? There are your slaves coming to the West Indies. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of work. Oh, we've got so little time left. Consumer boycotts, which put power in the hands of people even of modest income and can lend to a sense of doing something in the face of injustice, have a mixed track record. There have been some notable successes, others have yielded little. So refer to lines 1 to 3. How do consumer boycotts make people feel? Mark your question word. Mark your key word. Would you jot down an answer, please? Try not to lift. If you just lift this as an answer, you might in a FAL exam get a mark, but you're not going to get it in home language. Okay, so I based these questions on a past FAL matric paper. I used the same kind of phrasing so that you could get used to the phrasing, right? How do they make people feel? Well, how do we feel in the face of injustice? How do you feel? We were having this discussion over lunch with my family today, and my son was saying he feels so helpless. And I'm saying, no, we've got to keep on fighting. Every single person must keep on doing something. And he's saying, but there's just such a sense of it's so big and not enough people are fighting together. But how does it make it feel if you enter a consumer boycott? You feel at least I'm doing something. So it makes you feel a little bit better that you're not just allowing injustice to go on. It makes you feel, so based on my family's discussion, less helpless, less frustrated. All right, now I'm asking you, how does the word injustice make you feel? And I'm saying to you, explain why. Now, I'm going to leave you to do that. So please would you make a note of the question. In the same way that I gave you blood sugar, and I can see I've got 4 minutes left. I'm not going to get to blood sugar, all right? I always overestimate how much I can do, but you activated your neural pathways, so that's something. Just make a note. When you hear the word injustice, how does it make you feel? And tell me why. You might like to be specific about that injustice. What kind of injustice are we talking about? Is it people fired from their jobs? Is it something about police brutality? What is it? And then tell me about why it makes you feel. And in explaining, try to be specific. Do I have time to do just something more? Look at the question. In your view, why did England allow slavery in its colonies after the slave trade had been banned? I'm asking you to state 2 points. Now, is the answer in the passage? It's got to come from you. So this is where we are trying to develop your critical thinking skills. So you've got a country that allows, encourages, uses the slave trade to build up its own wealth. Then enough people go, hang on, this is disgusting, this is inhuman, this is brutal, this is not Christian, it's got to stop. So enough people make a fuss, and the slave trade is stopped. Look at the question. Why would the country allow slavery in its colonies, not in England, in its colonies. Colonies, why? Would you answer that and send some replies to me that I could look at next week? Do I have time just to go back to my headline? How one woman pulled off, what did we say this meant? To achieve something, to achieve success, not something, to achieve success when something is difficult. The first consumer boycott, the first, and helped inspire the British to abolish, get rid of slavery. So looking at that headline now, please tell me that you understand so much more about a consumer boycott, what it means, and you can relate it to today, right? I mean, I don't mean today as in now, I mean like today. And one woman can help this. All right, so no, I never got back to my blood sugar. Doesn't matter. Please practice your reading skills.